taking a look at an X3 for potentially an oil leak. This is an E83 X3 with an N52 engine. Some of the common places that leak is the oil filter housing and oil filter housing gasket for the oil cooler, which is just a tiny bit in the back. A lot of times this can be pretty catastrophic when it actually starts to leak, where one day it'll be fine and then you'll have spray all over the top, even spraying out onto the insulation for the hood. This is dry and this looks like it to be relatively minimal. There's just a tiny little sign of it maybe starting on that back side right in here, right in that crack. Now if I come over here to the side, the exhaust side, I can actually see there is a sign of some oil leakage. And you're looking for obviously the oil itself and any kind of dirt that collects to the oil, and that is a sign of a leak. You can see that right along here. Let me try to get a close-up of that. You can see how the dirt's actually starting to collect. Now sometimes this is a valve cover that's failed due to a crack. It could be the valve cover gasket, but I'm going to remove the vanity cover and to get a better look, because you don't know sometimes if it's actually coming from higher up. On an E83 X3 you have this snorkel piece right here, and to really get this cover off, so I've actually removed the screws. You have two in the front, and then you have one that's further back here, and then you have one hidden in the corner right in the back. This actually won't clear, so you actually can't remove the cover. You can actually take the cross member off, which is this piece here. You have a couple of those plastic rivets and some bolts on each side. Or I think if I take the front off here, which I want to inspect the front anyway to see if I have any oil getting onto any coolant hoses, on the E83 I have to take the snorkel piece off, which is just held on by some T30 Torxes, two here and one on each side. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that. Then behind that I'm going to have two other Torxes so I can remove this piece back here. It's a little tight. Might be a little rust in there. No problem there. No problem there. I'm gonna have to switch to a ratchet. Alright, these two in the front got a little tight, so what I want to do is tighten them back up and then back them off until it starts getting tight again, and then go back down. If I just tried to continue, you got a chance of damaging the bolt or the thread. So if it starts getting too tight, just work it back and forth. There we go. Same thing here. Take that back down. Comes. Alright. Now I can lift this piece off right here. Just like that. Put that aside. And then you have two Torxes here. You have one up here and one over here. So you actually have four to take off. Let's see how these are. Doesn't feel too bad. Okay, let's switch. Speed things up. Keep in mind that these are some different threads between these and these. This is a coarse thread, and the ones in front are a fine thread. You don't want to mix those up, or you could damage the hold downs. Take those off. Right, now this snorkel piece right here, I can separate it here. Just pop that off, and this actually goes straight back. You can see it's held on by just this pressure fit right here by this front. This is the two hold downs, and then you have the ones on the side. So now we can get a better look at the front of the engine. I want to take a look at the front of the engine for any kind of oil, but I think my oil leak is coming from underneath the vanity cover on top of the valve cover. So I'm going to go ahead and pop that off. I should be able to remove this cover now. There we go. Take a look at the top of the motor. So on the top of the valve cover, we can see some traces of oil around the eccentric shaft sensor seal, which is this right here. The oil looks like it's coming down and running along the side here, and then onto this little shelf here, and then down onto the side of the valve cover. Now there's a little bit of oil trace in this hole down right down in here, which is also a ground. There's going to be a grommet down in there. There's some oil down in this lower cavity. Looks like the oil cap itself might be leaking a bit. And then you have another seal at the Valvetronic motor, which is this large gasket right here. And it looks like the back of the engine is pretty clean. Sometimes the valve cover cracks. It can crack anywhere along the this area right here. It tends to get a crack in it, and around the crankcase system, which I think is like this plastic welded area, which is down in here, and it runs on the top of the valve cover because the crankcase system is actually built into this valve cover. Usually with higher mileage vehicles, it's a better idea to replace the valve cover as a complete unit because you're also replacing the crankcase system at the same time. It looks like this one may be able to be fixed with replacing the O-ring and a resale of the valve cover and a cap, but you never can be 100% sure unless you can see a crack that it is cracked. You'd have to weigh the cost and labor time of replacing the entire valve cover and seals versus the cost of just doing seals with the labor and the possibility that you might need a valve cover, shortly thereafter. This vehicle has about 75,000 on it, so while we could try to do just the seals, I'm thinking it probably would be a smarter idea to do the entire valve cover. The other thing to check while you're here is to pull the connector off for the eccentric shaft sensor and check for oil in the eccentric shaft sensor. Oil in the eccentric shaft sensor, which actually this is looking at the position of the intake eccentric shaft, which is changing valve lift on the intake side using the Valvetronic motor. If the sensor goes bad or gets oil, sometimes you can end up with a no start situation, a crank no start. I recently just dealt with one in the workplace where this was actually clean, this inside the sensor, and it still wouldn't start, and it ended up that the sensor got stuck reading 255. That's just a value it sees, and because of that it went to full closed and the vehicle basically would crank and not start. Once you manually turned there's a little Allen key right here, you could take this off. You turn this a little bit so that it's not fully closed, and the car actually started and ran, not well, and then replace the sensor, which you have to do with the valve cover off, and the car started and ran. Of course, then I ended up with misfires on cylinders 4, 5, and 6, and basically the same engine. This engine has what's called diesel flaps as well, which are also on like an E46. This is just a little bit of a different style. This right here is the diesel flap, and there's also one below the intake. There's a smaller one and a larger one. And on that particular vehicle, for whatever reason, both of these failed in the open position, and I ended up with misfires on just the last bank, cylinders 4, 5, and 6. And it did take quite a bit of hunting to actually figure out the problem, because this does not set any kind of fault codes. Also, with the eccentric shaft sensor problem that I had, I also did not have any fault codes, so there was nothing to lead me to think that this was an eccentric shaft sensor problem. So basically you would just get there from old school diagnosis, compression, cylinder leakage, fuel pressure, and finally finding a value that's not correct that the engine's seeing. So let's go back to this sensor, and let me just move this out of the way. I already see oil, which means that this sensor needs replacement. Yep, you can see in there. That it's actually leaking through the pins. Now, oil can get pushed up and get into your engine computer. So if you check this, you can clean it out, but it would be just a temporary fix. This sensor does need to be replaced, and the pins need to be cleaned out on the other end. You can actually see the oil is actually building up right here. So hopefully the oil hasn't made its way to the engine computer. Probably not. It's more rare on this particular vehicle, unlike Mini Coopers, which tend to get some oil in the engine computer from a failed volume control solenoid. So this actually also needs a Valvetronic sensor with the valve cover replacement. Just pop this back in. Hopefully me disturbing that isn't going to cause any kind of a problem here. You know, just unplugging it and plugging it back in with that oil there could lead to a problem where the vehicle may not start. I don't think I'll have a problem, but there's always a potential, especially when you see that oil in there. A lot of times when the vehicle doesn't start, you can actually unplug this. You'll see the oil. Sometimes the vehicle will start with this unplugged. In that other case that I had, since it was stuck at 255, it still didn't start, even after it was unplugged. Other times you can clean the sensor out and the vehicle may start. Putting this back together, it slides right over the top, drops down, and we have some 5mm hold down screws. So the best thing is to just get all 4 started when you put in this vanity cover back on, and then snug them down. That way you can flex the cover a little bit to get them all started. This one way back here, which you don't have to take everything off, thankfully, to get to. And when you tighten these down, just tighten them down gently. I actually have seen one vehicle that somebody tightened down so tight that they went straight through the hole down and into the valve cover and cracked the valve cover. So you just want to snug these down. Get that back one. Again, these are a 5mm Allen. The fronts are much easier. Next is that snorkel piece. Just have to move this boot out of the way on the side. Actually, it comes off pretty easy too, so that does make it a lot easier. This should lock into place, and the 4 hold down locations should line up. Okay, and remember these were coarse thread. Get those started. And again, I like to just get each one started before tightening down. That way it can kind of locate itself, because there is a little play side to side. Okay. Then that snorkel. Right there, and then rest onto the air filter on the very bottom corner, right over here. Okay, after those four, I just have that front piece to put on. Today I was just doing an inspection to see what type of leaks this was, because it could have been a few different things. Thankfully it's not pouring out. But it looks like the leak's really starting to pick up a bit. So, and then these are the fine thread screws. Yeah, it's not holding really any kind of weight, so you just snug these down. Check that hole down. Over here. The way these work, it's just like a clip with the bottom part has some threads on it, so you just have to make sure that that caught on the bottom. That was probably one of the rusty ones, so it cleaned itself up. And that's it for now. So that's just a quick overview of some of the common oil leaks on this N52 engine. Unfortunately, this valve cover looks like it does need a little bit of work to stop this oil leak, but the best thing is that it was found before the owner of the vehicle breaks down, especially with that oil seeping through that eccentric shaft seal. Thanks for watching. Hopefully this helps somebody when they're doing a look over of their BMW. This would apply really for any N52 or even an N51 BMW engine, 6-cylinder.